I love his personality. Coach Z, he's a great coach, hands-on coaching, which I love. I mean, he's a quarterback guru, and as well as when I was on visit up there, he's just like he just clicked with me and my family like greatly. My grandpa loves him, my mom loves him, I love him. So it's really just like it's amazing.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Hello, and welcome to the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on the Kansas City Sports Network, brought to you by Home Field Apparel. I'm Kevin Flaherty, and I'm here with Ryan Wallace from GoPowerCat.com and 24/7 Sports. And we're talking about the world of local recruiting, from Kansas and Kansas City prospects to the college classes at Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri. This week brings a special guest that we'll get to in just a minute after the super necessary alarm and light effects. As always, if you like what you're hearing, tell your friends about us, subscribe, hit that like button, or leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple or Spotify. All those things help to grow the show and get us in front of more people like you. Ryan, as Nicki Minaj would say, pound the alarm. We have a commitment, and it is a quarterback. Kansas lands the first member of its 2026 class in Wichita Northwest, QB Jaylen Mason, likely to be the top signal caller in the state in that class. He's also our guest later in the show. Ryan, this is a guy that we're both really familiar with. What are your thoughts on the new Kansas commitment?
Yeah, I mean, I watched him since like the very first game of his freshman year at Mays when he was backing up Avery Johnson against Topeka, and he got in mop-up duty week 1, and I'm like, who's this cat? And I mean, really good player. And then we saw him at the beginning of his sophomore season last year. We've both seen him at camps his junior year, or going into his junior year. And Kevin, I just think that he's a really polished kid. And when, obviously we've had Justin Hoover on the show before. When we talk to him, he talks about how mechanically sound he is. And, again, when I start brushing up on some of his junior tape, it's a lot of the same stuff that's always been there, right? The footwork is really good, but I think his accuracy and his touch on the intermediate to deep balls is what separates him. I think he's got such a good feel of timing and placement on these deep balls. And yet at the same time, as we see in some of these highlights, he's got enough of a threat, right, to keep a defense honest with his feet. Now, is he, Jalen Daniels type? Maybe not, that type of elusiveness and speed. But like I said, as you see here, I mean, he's got some of that make you miss to him. And at about 6'1", 6'2", 195, like he's put together well enough to withstand some contact out of the pocket too. Would you like to see his arm strength get a little bit better? Of course. Would you like to see him maybe put a little bit more zip on some of those kind of shorter routes, right, and tighter spaces? Yes. But again, like when you talk about some of the stuff that he does, I think he's already above average and advanced in more areas than not. And, bringing him into KU, getting that guy in from Wichita that potentially could open that market for them. There's just way too many bonuses here and positives that outweigh the negatives. It's a great fit and a great get for the KU Jayhawks.
Yeah, I think you look at the zip stuff that you're talking about. I think some of that will come naturally as he continues to fill out his frame. I like you bringing up Jalen Daniels in this one just because I think one of the things he does do that's very Jalen Daniels-like is he is terrific in the face of pressure. The number of times you see him on tape where, hey, somebody gets into the backfield, it looks like he's dead to rights, and he handles it coolly, avoids the pressure, and gives his team a chance to make a scramble play while keeping his eyes downfield, I think is very Jalen Daniels-like. I'm interested to see him continue to develop because I do think he's gotten a little bit better each year, and I do think there are some really nice things for Kansas to tap into there. I saw him at KU's camp when he threw the summer and basically earned his offer and thought he was really good there. I thought he was coachable, the type of guy that, hey, if he's not doing something right the first time, coaches tell him once, and he gets that down, and you can't really oversell how important that is for a guy like a quarterback to be able to pick something and then apply it athletically pretty quickly. Another alert, Ryan.
Well, one more thing, Kevin, real quick, that I did want to jump in on is because I know, the K-State fans are probably curious. They see the Iowa State, the KU offer for Jaylen Mason, no K-State. I wanted to go with what you said. I, too, saw him at camp, at K-State's camp this summer, and for whatever reason, he wasn't the flavor for K-State, but I don't think that had anything to do with his performance at the K-State camp. He was absolutely good enough to get an offer. I mean, he was on par with every other quarterback that was there. From my recollection, there were some fairly touted guys that they brought in that week from California and out of state. So, again, wasn't the flavor for K-State, but by no means was that performance related from his camp. I thought he was really strong in that camp. And Kevin, I wanted to toss it back to you and say this. I started digging and trying to do my own historical comps for KU, right? And Jalen Daniels, kind of fits, and he's kind of the most recent guy that I think
I know what you're going to say here, by the way.
I don't know if you will. I'm going to bring up two names, and I want you to say if I'm closer to one or the other, maybe a combination. I think when I talk about accuracy, he's already probably passed both of these guys just based on stats. Is he more Dylan Smith or is he more Jason Swanson?
Ooh, okay. So the body type is so different than what Swanson was, because Swanson was kind of a sawed-off thick kid, and Jalen's, not necessarily built the same way. Dylan Smith was a little bit the same way. Smith had a better arm. He had more, Smith's comp might actually be Jaylen Daniels if you were to take him and throw him into a modern offense. The guy I think he reminds me a little bit of, but I think he's ahead of at the same point, is Montel Cozart. And so you see kind of the similar frame, and there are going to be some KU fans like, oh my God, Montel Cozart wasn't bad after the trash heap that Kansas's offense kind of was at that time. And you and I both saw Montel in high school. He was a kid that I feel like people kind of wanted to be really athletic, and not that he wasn't athletic, but that wasn't maybe what he wanted to be, right? He wanted to be more of a pocket passer. And I think with Jaylen Mason, your comments on his fit at Kansas State were so apt, and that Kansas State still wants a quarterback to be terrific in the running game. And I think that when you look at Jaylen, if you were to bring up a weakness, it's not necessarily a weakness, but his running isn't the amount of strength that you would want to be quarterback at Kansas State, where I don't want to say that K-State doesn't look for a dual threat, but a lot of times the run needs to be the stronger part of those two threats. And I think that for Jaylen, it's the exact opposite. But I think he probably has a little bit higher ceiling than Montel Cozart.
Yeah.
Similar, I think, in terms of frame, maybe a little bit, in terms of maybe being more pocket passer than people give him credit for, but still also having the athletic ability to hurt you with his legs when he's asked to do that. Sticking with K-State, let's get another alert. This one with a purple tinge. 5-star tight end Linkon Cure will reportedly visit Oregon this weekend. Something that probably doesn't surprise you if you saw Lincoln's interview on our show. Ryan, what's the latest there?
Yeah, this is a topic that I don't want to be discussing on this show again, and yet here we are. And here's the thing, Kevin, is at this point, I said at Go Power Cat weeks ago that I was done kind of giving the hypotheticals any oxygen with this story. Once he makes the visit, we have something to talk about. Until then, it was a lot of hypotheticals and, Oregon stirring the pot. Now that it sounds like we've got flights booked, and I know Lincoln has kind of said some stuff about I have 24 hours to get my money back. I mean, I think with the flights are booked, he's going, right?
Yeah, probably so.
Now we have something to talk about. It's an interesting dilemma that he's under. And I think one of the important things that, and I know, fans is short for fanatic. So I understand that it's hard, and there's the whole comparison to being engaged, and you wouldn't leave your engagement. And there's all those things that come up when it comes to recruiting. I like how thorough Linkon is and has been. I like when really any players are going. You're only in this opportunity once. And I know there's things out there like the transfer portal, but nobody should be making a decision with the idea of, well, the transfer portal's in my back pocket. You should be making the decision of, this is where I want to be. This is what I love, right? So I don't fault Linkon at all for that. It's also really interesting too, though, because I still am not really sweating it. If I'm a K-State fan, I know it's easy to sweat when you have the number one team in the country with all the pros of being an Oregon football player and Nike. And, Linkon himself talked on this show about the kind of design route that he might be able to take there from an academic non-football side. And that seemed to interest him. But, for me, at the end of the day, I think K-State's going to have the last word. I don't think that I would be very, very stunned if Linkon comes back from Oregon and immediately makes a decision either way. Yep. Either flip to Oregon or announce I am 1,000% committed to K-State. This, to me, is a recruitment that, to my chagrin, is probably going to go, the distance. And I think Oregon's going to keep knocking on the door and blowing up the phone, just like I think K-State is prepared for that. But ultimately, Kevin, I keep coming back on the same thing that I've always said, which is, if there was enough emotional tug for K-State to win out the first time, and he talks about crying in the stands and calling Coach Kleiman up and telling him he was committed, and knowing how close he is with his family and how much he's hearing about it in a town like Goodland, and how far away and removed Oregon and that culture is from everything he's ever grown up with, this still feels like one that I'm hard-pressed to go against Kansas State winning. But I'm also curious, Kevin, on your thoughts as kind of an unbiased side here.
Yeah, I don't get 24/7 sports crystal ball ability anymore, but if I were able to log a crystal ball, I think it would still be for Kansas State. And I think a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, I think quite frankly, he's going to have a really hard time telling K-State no. And I think there was a reason that he told K-State yes in the first place. I think that Kansas State just checks all of his boxes and what he really looks for. And it doesn't hurt, Ryan, when he comes into town for the Sunflower Showdown and K-State's out there throwing touchdown passes or near touchdown passes to tight ends kind of all over the place, and the way the tight ends have been used in that system. I really do think K-State's a great fit for him. I appreciate him doing his due diligence because, like you said, this is the sort of thing that you only want to do once. And I think talking to that family a little bit and everything, this is a decision they want him to make once. They don't want him to transfer at some point. And so I appreciate him doing the work on the front end. I still think it could be something that he goes out there and he falls in love with Oregon. He's still got to return to Goodland, and he's still going to see, hey, that's a really long way from Goodland. It's a long-distance relationship where K-State is not, and I don't want to just make this because, hey, K-State's closer, because I really do think that there are all those emotional ties there and everything, and K-State is a great fit for him. But I do think ultimately it would be really tough for him to say no to K-State to go to Eugene. I think that's a pretty far step out there, especially like you said, with him being so close to his family. We wound up hitting a doubleheader this past weekend, catching the first half of Bishop Miège's win over Lewisburg, and then heading to the second half of St. James Academy's surprising, at least by margin, upset of Blue Valley. And we'll get to more thoughts on those games after the break, including our Unsung Star of the Week. But first, Ryan, we don't typically bloviate on this show, but we do try to be honest in our conversations on recruiting and prospects, and I feel like that applies to high school football as well. And it's just so unfortunate that Lewisburg team that had a really special regular season had to play Bishop Miège as its first-round opponent. This isn't, if you know us, this isn't anything against Bishop Miège. We love Coach John Holmes. We've interviewed several of the terrific kids there. It's more that Lewisburg kind of got hosed and shouldn't have had to play Miege in the first round of the playoffs. For those unfamiliar, Bishop Miege got the East number 15 seed because of a 1-7 record in the regular season, meaning it played the number 2 seed in the East in Lewisburg. But Ryan, do you know how many 4A games Bishop Miege played this year?
Off the top of my head, no.
1, and that's the playoff game against Lewisburg.
Wow.
So Miege's 1-7 came against 5A and 6A schools, and that's not even talking about their games against Missouri powerhouses like Rockhurst and Cardinal Ritter. That's not a 1-7 team worthy of a 15 seed. And so this is kind of, I guess, a long-winded call to Keisha and the Kansas legislature to find a way to fix this. There may not be a perfect solution. Private and parochial schools, they often have outsized involvement relative to their enrollment that basically makes them a class or two bigger by roster, even with a smaller number of students. When I was down in Pittsburgh, St. Mary's Colgan would have significantly more football playing kids than Arma Northeast, even if Northeast was in the same classification or even one class up. But there does need to be a way to account for Miege playing a 5A, 6A schedule, maybe a stats-based schedule modifier or a power ranking, like Massey or something like that, rather than the Stags getting treated like any old 4A team that went 1-7 against a traditional 4A schedule. This is kind of my final point on this, and then I'll turn it over to you, Ryan. But if Miege played Lewisburg in the 4A semifinals, I don't think I would have had a big problem with it. It's not necessarily about Miege being in 4A, but for the Stags to get Lewisburg as a first-round opponent, or Lewisburg to get Miege as a first-round opponent, it's pretty rough, and it didn't allow the Wildcats to take advantage of such a great season, and a season that really could have had the town talking for years to come had they been able to make a state playoff run if they avoided Miege in that first round.
Yeah, and make no mistake about it. I mean, Lewisburg had their chances to win that game too.
Yeah.
So I mean, Miege fans will be the first to tell you that, and Lewisburg was competitive in that game. It wasn't like they were outmatched, I think, as has been the case at times in previous years. But, I'm right there with you, Kevin. I know the multiplier thing came up, through Keisha, went to the state house, and sounds like it stalled, might be dead. That it encompassed a couple different things, socioeconomic status and state championships, and those sorts of things were all involved. I think you could probably make it simpler than that. I still don't understand why at the high school level you can't have relegation like they do in English Premier League. If you're winning a bunch in your level, you move up. I mean, I think Missouri does that, right, with some of the suburban leagues and stuff like that. I think that they have shifts. I know enrollment can be tough, but again, if you've got a school that might have, just because they have 2,000 kids in it, but they've won one game in football in 3 years, doesn't mean they have to be in 6A. You're not doing them any justice. You're more doing them a disservice at that point. So whether it's a multiplier thing, relegation, I think you're onto something with like strength of record. And not to call out Atchison, but Atchison getting the one over Lewisburg. I think you can kind of go do your own research and see the schedules there. And I think strength of record would have, mitigated that to some degree. And if you don't want to do strength of record by some sort of mathematical thing that Keisha handles, put a committee together. Yep. You've got a lot of great guys and gals in the state that go to games just like you and I do on Friday nights that are unbiased, and they could probably put together, kind of like you said, a power rankings regardless of your record. And it's probably not going to be perfect, just like the college football playoff bracket on Tuesday night wasn't perfect for BYU. But it's time. Like it really is. For all the good that Miege, I think, has done it at the 4A level, right? And I think they've made teams like Lewisburg and others, kind of rise up to their level, and you can see the improvement that Lewisburg has made. This isn't just a Miege thing, or any private school, really. I mean, it's time. If you're Mill Valley and you win a bunch or whatever, maybe it's time you test yourself and have that natural push, just like it's time to maybe help some of those teams that probably need to go down a level and kind of find their footing again. I'm with you. Let's make it happen. Whatever Keisha wants to do, call the verbal commitment, text them at mobile line. Let's talk. It needs to happen.
I'm glad that you made that transition, because that's exactly where we're going from here. So we will have our chat with recent Kansas quarterback commitment Jaylen Mason here in a bit. But first, let's hear from you, and Keisha, over at the KCSN hotline, powered by Mint Mobile. If you have any questions or comments for us here at the Verbal Commitment Podcast, shoot us a text over at 913-407-6524, and we may just talk about it on the show. We also want to tell you about our friends over at Home Field Apparel, who can deck you out in short-sleeve T-shirts of your favorite team to wear in hot basketball gyms, or in layered outerwear for those last few college football games, or just getting around outside as the weather continues to get colder. Speaking of cold, our producer Nick Springer recently acquired a sick Youngstown State shirt that says, "Welcome to the Ice Castle." So even if you decide not to go for Youngstown State as your team and focus on the local schools, Kansas State, and Missouri fans all have more than 40 items apiece to choose from. Head to homefieldapparel.com and use the promo code link below in the description, and you can get 15% off your first order. We'll be right back.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your number one source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Welcome back to the Verbal Commitment Podcast, sponsored by Home Field Apparel, and let's get into our unsung star of the week. St. James Academy defensive end Max Raquette was dominant in the Thunder's 48-22 win over Blue Valley. Ryan, what did you notice about Max's play?
Well, I mean, he saw it off. I mean, he's probably 6'2" on a good day. From a recruiting standpoint, I definitely still think that he needs to be a guy that's evaluated on some of the smaller levels a little bit more than it sounds like he is. But I do understand kind of the tweener in him, right? That maybe he's not athletic enough to be the outside linebacker that a lot of teams, even at smaller college levels, are going to, and maybe not quite as long enough as you want as a defensive end. But the motor was unreal against Blue Valley. He was impacting every single play, even if he wasn't making the play. It was just constant for him. And we've seen that even earlier in the season against Blue Valley Northwest. This wasn't just a one-game kind of scenario. And on a bigger level, I got to shout out St. James and talk just real quick about how things are shaping up in that 5A bracket for them. Yeah. They've got a great game coming up on Friday night, kind of a rivalry matchup with Baser Lenwood, two teams that have met previously in the 4A bracket. But the way the bracket shook out, one of those teams is going to end up with Blue Valley North or Leavenworth. No disrespect to either of those teams, but it's the type of bracket that you look at what St. James was able to do to Blue Valley. You watch kind of how they were able to have both quarterbacks in play on offense and how just attacking oriented that defense is. If they can find a way to get past Baser, do not be surprised for a second if St. James is not only playing in sub-state, but is competing with potentially a St. Thomas Aquinas and a Mill Valley, giving either one of those teams fits and maybe finding themselves in Emporia when it's all said and done. This is a really strong team, Kevin.
A strong team hitting on all cylinders at the exact right time. You know, it was great to see the return of Tyson Beshore from injury, which allowed the Thunder offense, with the help from their stacked receiving core, take advantage of a Blue Valley defense that could have 3 FBS, if not Power 4 players on it. So that was a pretty impressive performance. In Miege's win, I thought we saw a really nice throw and catch duo with Marco Rodriguez firing passes to Taryn Jackson. Well, what did you kind of see out of those guys and out of Miege as well?
Yeah, I mean, I thought, Taryn was a guy that we hadn't really seen, and he's definitely slight in build, but, he's quick, he's shifty. Yep. Marco obviously passed the eye test. I thought he was putting really good touch on some of the long balls where you see kind of what Justin Hoover was talking about on this very show several weeks ago with him. And I think maybe if they'd had a little bit better season, maybe you would have seen his recruitment take off the way that we kind of expected heading into the year. But the thing that caught my attention in that game, beyond Ashton Moore, who was really good, is Conley Hovey. I thought both the guys that you and I teased on this show last week, that were kind of the unsung guys, Linkon Cure at Blue Valley and Conley Hovey for Lewisburg, really fit the bill in terms of kids that probably deserve more attention, Kevin.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Ashton Moore and Hovey. Let's start with Hovey and kind of what we saw from him. Great frame, Ryan. And with that frame, I think really underrated athleticism. I think he plays at a higher athletic level than maybe he tests.
Yeah. I mean, I thought he was, when we saw him, a year or two ago, as kind of the younger brother, the younger, bigger brother, he was more kind of your standard old school tight end. Didn't seem like the most flight of feet type player. We're starting to see, I think, his basketball game transition more, right? The soft hands, the footwork, quick feet. And I thought that he just was more agile, could really bend for his frame. So whether, potentially you see him as a defensive end, I think he's still probably best suited as a tight end. He's got offers, right? He's got some FBS offers, group of 5 types. Whether he's there, whether he's in the FCS, I think that's the type of kid that, again, the tape, once you start putting it on, you're going to go, yeah, this should have been a player that we had been working on all season, maybe back into the summer. And depending on what happens with some of those offers, maybe some of them have already closed up. That could be a real win in the PWO market too, Kevin.
Well, I agree. Let's switch gears real quick and get to Ashton Moore, the Kansas State commitment. Obviously really good at linebacker, but Ryan, super fun to watch at running back, especially when he gets into the open field and you see some poor DBs kind of have to make life-changing decisions on whether or not they want to try and tackle him.
Yeah, if you know Good Morning Football and Kyle Brandt's segment about angry runs, Ashton Moore had a couple of those. He would have taken home the scepter without a doubt. I mean, look, the thing with Ashton is he is everything that Austin Moore is currently in terms of the fundamental tackling, in terms of the leadership, in terms of just like the consistency, the motor, and he's probably faster. Like, I think he's more athletic than his older brother. The problem for Ashton is going to be, if it's a problem, maybe not, is that he is shorter in build. I think Austin is longer. He's taller. He's going to probably be bigger. I don't know if Ashton can carry a whole lot more weight. But at the same time, Kevin, you watch Ashton Moore and you just kind of go, I don't know if that's going to matter, because he does so many other things at such a high level. And he's going to be someone that the coaches are going to be able to trust from a playbook standpoint, from a technique fundamental standpoint, that don't be surprised if we've got another Moore from Lewisburg that is racking up tackles and making high career snap, numbers when it's all said and done at K-State.
We need to trademark the fun film guy, but I do think that Ashton Moore is a fun film guy. I mean, he
no doubt,
absolute missile on defense. He made a couple plays on defense, Ryan, where I didn't think he was in position. A guy would catch a pass and I'm like, oh, Ashton's over there, and the ball carrier is down over here and Ashton's getting off the top of him. And wait a minute, how did he get over there? Linebacker's a perfect fit for him, although if you're playing, and we talked about this, coming out of the game, if you're playing a team with a physical running back and it's early on in Ashton Moore's career, you may use him as a scout team running back too, because I think he can simulate that and give your defense a pretty good look as well. That brings us to this week and another doubleheader of prospect pit stops, this time on the Missouri side of the Metro. We'll be headed to Liberty North at Liberty, and also swinging by shortly after, Blue Springs at Blue Springs South. Ryan, let's take a look at that first game, Liberty North at Liberty, and who you're watching.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. I mean, these are two, the names say it all. These are bitter rivalries. So to have these matchups in the playoff bracket, so early on, this was two games that Kevin and I could not miss on the Missouri side. And when you talk about Liberty, Liberty comes out, beats Liberty North the kind of reigning power over there, 12-7 in week 2. But Liberty North was a team that knocked Liberty out last year in the playoffs, 33-10. So again, you see the conflict here between these two sides. For me, this comes down to I shouldn't say it comes down to. We've got some tremendous matchups. Trevor Bendel, the talented Liberty offensive tackle. I've talked already about Modi Williams and how much I love that kid from Liberty North. Excited to see him compete on both sides of the line. But for me, I think it's going to come down big time to the Liberty North offense, Zamar Cheatham and Tillman Martin at quarterback, and how they can get by and how Liberty decides to defend those guys, particularly at the linebacker spot. Isaiah Hung is a guy that's committed to South Dakota State. They've got several other younger guys, one of which is Brooks Ragland, 2026 linebacker. Kevin, he's 6'2", 195 pounds, played last year like 175, and you can see what he's doing now with that added weight and has not lost a step. 72 tackles is his junior year, 11 tackles for loss. Watch him come off the edge. The closing speed, Kevin, is immediate on tape. But I think he plays the run spectacularly here. You see him just sniff out the ball carrier. But again, closing speed, his timing, the way he identifies plays, he, to me, is a big-time difference maker. Saw him at K-State camp at one of their more loaded rosters of their camp season, and he stood out. I think that this is an emerging junior on that side, and this is the type of game that he can really take his recruitment to the next level, because when you put that kind of tape against a team like Liberty North, that immediately will get you noticed if you're Brooks Ragland, and I think you're going to like what you see on Friday night.
Flipping over to Blue Springs at Blue Springs South, we've talked on the show about Blue Springs edge Ronell Johnson. He's collected offers from all of the local schools, and a player who's received interest from those same schools, but the offers haven't come in just yet, is Gary Hill III. What are you looking forward to watching with Hill?
Yeah, I mean, Ronell is a guy that you and I are excited to see. Hopefully, maybe we can chat with him after the game as well. But again, another big time meeting. These two haven't played together or against each other in the playoffs since 2018. Blue Springs South got the better of Blue Springs earlier this season. So, again, a lot at stake. Obviously, it's playoff time. But with Gary Hill Jr., 35 receptions, 520 yards on the year, 15 yards per catch, and 7 touchdowns. He separates, Kevin, but I think he's also quite shifty. You see him here on kind of the curl route and then leaves the defender, even though the defender, I thought, timed that tackle pretty well. Gary Hill just leaves him. He plays with a kind of a bigger body, it seems. I'm excited to see him in person because It seems like he's not super tall. I think he might be 5'11" or 6 feet. And he's got the speed, but he's stout. Like, there's some Jafar Armstrong in him a little bit, Kevin. And this is a huge game for him because, Blue Springs South had a really talented year, led by a duo in the backfield. But Gary Hill's kind of been that guy that's been able to keep a defense honest. You can't bring everybody into the box. You have to keep an eye on Gary Hill. And Liberty North has the guys to do it. Divine Jones, we've talked about him on this show. Trishonda Neal is another junior that might get the opportunity to slide inside, kind of in that nickel role where Gary Hill is in the slot. And that would be a terrific matchup of two juniors that I would love to see. But I'm telling you what, man, Gary Hill, I keep checking in on the tape week by week. He is a complete receiver that I'm really excited to see how he goes up against, how he fares against two really good corners and a solid secondary that Liberty North's going to throw at them on Friday night, or Blue Springs is going to throw at them on Friday night.
Yeah, it's great when you can see those matchups, because a lot of times in our profession, it's tough to make judgments on wide receivers and cornerbacks because you don't often see a wide receiver against a really good cornerback with a quarterback that can make the cornerback play if the receiver runs a great route. And so we'll have that much match.
You know what I just realized, Kevin? You know what I just realized? We had a big error here, but we're going to leave it, and we're going to make me look stupid. That matchup actually won't happen until Blue Springs South and Liberty North play if they were to win. I just realized I had a major brain error here. But the fact is, what I said about Gary Hill still stands, And what I said about the Liberty North secondary still stands. And boy, Kevin, let me tell you, if they play each other in 1 week from today, that'll be a matchup. But again,
that could be a fun matchup.
Still excited to see Gary Hill perform on Friday night.
Yeah, I think so. And the Kansas City area has produced some great wide receivers, obviously, over the last, decade plus. And I'm interested to see how Hill kind of slots into that group, not just, in this year, but being a guy in next year's class, seeing if he's a guy that maybe makes that jump that we've seen guys make from their junior year to their senior year as well. Up next, our interview with Kansas quarterback commitment, Jaylen Mason. Stay tuned.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
We're back on the Verbal Commitment podcast brought to you by Home Field Apparel, and we are now joined by Wichita Northwest quarterback Jaylen Mason, who recently committed to Kansas. Jaylen, thanks for joining us.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me on here.
First off, Jaylen, why'd you pick Kansas? Well, what was the decision there, and how did that come about?
First off, just I've been up there plenty of times. The coaches, they've all shown enormous amount of love. So I mean, it just feels like it was time to make that commitment, as well as just playing for my home state, staying in state. That's a big thing as well. Just staying close to home with my family, my mom, things like that.
I was at the camp this summer when you went there and kind of earned your offer. Did you know going in that, hey, I'm throwing for my offer today, basically, or I have to play really well here, and this could be sort of the next step between getting that level of interest from them?
Yeah, definitely. I went in there with the mindset of just doing what I do, and then just God will do the rest. So that's really was my mindset going into that camp.
We have to ask, what was Coach Zabrowski like? We've had David McComb on this show, and he's had stories and everything. What's that personality like, and how do you vibe with him?
I love his personality. Coach Z, he's a great coach, hands-on coaching, which I love. I mean, he's a quarterback guru, and as well as when I was on visit up there, he's just like he just clicked with me and my family like greatly. My grandpa loves him, my mom loves him, I love him. So it's really just like it's amazing.
Jaylen, when you committed, pretty cool graphic that you had with you in elementary school with the KU hoodie on. What was your first kind of KU athletics memory that you can go back to? Maybe it was football, maybe it was basketball, but kind of the time when you were like, this is a team that I'm going to root for.
Really, it was just watching Devontae Graham, Frank Mason, just growing up there. I used to really, when I was younger, I wanted to go to KU to play basketball, but I mean, really just watching them, those guys, and just basketball growing up is really what I remember. Like, those are my main memories.
Now, obviously, too, with football, you mentioned that you've been up there a lot. You've camped with them. You've kind of gotten to know what their offensive scheme looks like. And I know I speak for Kevin when I say I think you fit what they want to do really well. But what was it that you saw? Because during your process, you had to kind of say, where's the right scheme for me? What was it about KU's offensive structure that you felt like is such a great transition for you to make and a natural one?
Really, it's just like it's a balanced structure. So it's like kind of what I'm in right now. It's like it's balanced. I'll use my legs a lot, throw the ball is like obviously, and then run game. Their run game is strong. So I feel like I fit that scheme pretty good.
We had Justin Hoover on the show, and one of the things that he said about you that was most impressive was your poise. The fact that you were sort of even keeled. The pressure rises, and you're still here. Well, what do you attribute that to?
What does that mean?
Like what? Why do you think you're that way? Like why are the pressure moments not too big for you?
I would say just me. I stay calm. I don't think too much. I just let my reactions. I just let my reactions go, and I just react. I don't really think too much. I'm just always going to react to what happens.
Speaking of Coach Hoover and working with him, and even just kind of in your own personal training in Wichita, right? I remember watching you as a freshman. We got to see you as a sophomore. We've watched, obviously, some junior tape of you. Kevin and I have our own opinions, but I want to hear from you, Jaylen. Where do you feel like you have grown the most from that first snap as a varsity starter last year against Bishop Carroll to where you are now in the 6A state playoffs?
I would say really like last year and my freshman year, I was going out there kind of with like something to prove, like me. Like I wanted to make a name for myself. And this year it's just like, it's just working on being a leader, being like a more, I want to say, I don't feel like I was selfish, but like just making the right reads and just really just being the great teammate quarterback has to be, especially at the next level.
You guys have a pretty strong 2026 class there at Wichita Northwest. For people who don't necessarily know, John Michael Fountain, Chase Carter. Are you getting in those guys' ears a little bit now that you have your college choice figured out, and what's that been like?
Yes, sir. I definitely am. I'm always on them. But I mean, at the end of the day, I want them to do what's best for them. But I mean, we've been playing together since all three of us have been playing together since 5th grade. So I mean, I say why not continue it?
Absolutely. Another player that you're connected to that some people might not realize is obviously you spent your freshman year at Mays and you were the varsity backup to senior Avery Johnson. What did you learn most from that 1 year you spent with Avery? Maybe it was something on the football field. Maybe it was something off the field related to recruiting or what have you. I'm curious, kind of what was your biggest takeaway from spending that year kind of behind Avery?
I would say I learned from him. He's really poised, like through all the highs and the lows he went through. He stayed just like that same level, and that's a really big thing. I try to pay attention to and kind of mock what he did. So that's really, I think, the biggest thing, because I mean, he had a great season that year. He never got cocky. He was always a cool, like a humble dude. So
you guys are sitting 8-1 right now, still in the playoffs. Have a big game this week against South, who you played earlier. Potentially a rematch with Manhattan in the next level. That's your guys' only loss this year. After that Manhattan loss, it feels like you guys kind of circled the wagons and have been playing your best football heading into the playoffs and in the playoffs now. Why are you guys maybe equipped to make a deep run in the playoffs this year?
I would say first off, because all the work we put in the off season this year, like these are the moments we trained for this off season. Like so there's a couple of, like, there's some guys that left and there's some guys that came, and we all know, everybody that's here, that they want to be a Grizzly. So really, we just want to stick together and be a brotherhood, and really that's it. So these are the moments that we've trained for all off season. So I think that's why we'll make this big playoff run.
Jaylen, for folks that might be tuning in to the rest of your games here in the 6A playoffs and kind of watching you for the first time, maybe some new KU fans that haven't gotten a chance to watch Wichita Northwest, you've talked about how much you've grown kind of mentally and emotionally, and your composure and how calm you are. What, though, like in your football game, do you feel like is your strength? And what's the one area like I need to get better at before I'm ready to be up at KU?
I would say my strength is just my playmaking ability in the pocket, just evading, like sacks, things like that. And then my things that I need to get work on is, I would say, definitely speed, obviously getting stronger, things like that, just to play at the D1 level. So I would say my running abilities, that's what I need to work on the most.
I think I speak for Ryan when I say we're both big Coach Martin fans here on this show. Do you have any funny stories from Coach Martin, and what's it like to play quarterback for Coach Martin there at Wichita Northwest?
Coach Martin, he's a tough coach. So, I mean, especially last year, he was tough on me going in, but I mean, it's all going to pay off because me and him, we're pretty much always on the same page. I'm at his house every Sunday watching film, going over the game. So he's a great coach, and I'm grateful to have him as my coach, 100%.
Great guy, definitely a guy that'll go to bat for you too.
Sure.
Jaylen, here's another thing that I'm kind of curious about. We're in the middle of the 2025 cycle for recruiting, and it's kind of interesting because David McComb was a guy that wanted to be the first commit for that class for KU and kind of be the cornerstone and the building block for KU. Now in 2026, it's another quarterback that wants to be the building block. Did you go into recruiting saying, man, I'd like to kind of be the leadoff hitter and build the guys around me? Or did it just kind of happen that you were ready and, oh, by the way, I'm the number one commitment for this class?
Really, it just kind of happened. I didn't go in with the mindset of I want to be the number one. I just felt like it was time. Felt that I've been, after a lot of praying to God and talking to my families, things like that. So really, it just happened, and so be it. I'm the number one, or I'm the first one class. Yeah.
Now we talked a little bit about your teammates. Are there any other players in that 2026 class, in state or otherwise, that maybe you're talking to or are close to?
Yeah, there's a couple of guys that, like Hunter Higgins. I used to play baseball with him in Little League. Let me think, some other guys. Obviously, John Mike. Really, I think that's it in the Wichita area. And then, I mean, there's a bunch of guys on our team with the potential, 100%. Like, I feel like after this season, they'll definitely pick up some hype around their name for sure.
Absolutely. And how important is it to you, speaking of that Wichita area, to kind of stamp KU back on the Wichita market? They're slowly kind of picking up some steam there. Do you feel like maybe you can be the guy that really kicks that back into gear again of getting the Jayhawks more entrenched in recruiting in Wichita?
Yes, sir. That's my plan. I just want to get as many guys as I can and just have them come to KU with me for sure.
Ryan will get to rapid fire, I think, here pretty quick. But one more thing I wanted to ask you is just, what was your commitment story? Were you with the coaches when you committed? Did you call them? What was that commitment like?
I was talking to my mom and my grandpa and my dad about it pretty much all day, just telling them I think I'm ready. And then I came to the conclusion I was ready. So that night, I think it was Tuesday night, and I just called Coach Z. I told him that I'm ready to commit. He made a quick phone call to Coach Leipold, and then I called Coach Leipold and told him. So that's really it's not too impressive of a story, but
was Coach Z pretty fired up?
Yeah, he was pretty fired up.
Good deal. Well, Ryan, do you want to hit with some rapid fire here?
Let's do it. Jaylen, you talked about how you're a KU basketball guy, and you'll be supporting that team through your career on the football field. Let's pretend that you're Coach Mason, the basketball coach at KU, and you can handpick any former KU basketball player for a game-winning shot. You got to have it. Who are you going to? Who are you putting the ball in the hands of?
Is it a three-pointer or just any type of?
You're a guard, so let's say it's a three-pointer.
Say Devontae Graham.
Hey, that's probably not a bad pick for a three-pointer or a two-pointer if you need a game winner. How about this one, Jaylen? What's your favorite KU football uniform or maybe color that you're excited to wear?
I really I like them all, but I like the baby blue. That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, the old school, the 60s uniform. Yeah,
very clean. What's your go-to pregame song, Jaylen?
Go-to pregame song? I say probably "Dreams and Nightmares" by Meek Mill.
Okay, good one.
How about let's stay in Wichita here for the next two. you can start, bench, and cut. And I apologize to these Wichita Northwest alumnus, but one of them's got to go. Breece Hall, Chris Harper, or Cam Wembley?
Oh, man. Okay, first off, got to start Breece.
All right.
Oh, man. I say bench Cameron Wembley and cut. And I mean, no disrespect.
The K-State fans are upset. I'm just playing. One more for Wichita. New Way. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
I don't think I've ever had New Way.
Oh,
Really?
That's that. When Kevin and I are down in Wichita, in fact, I think when we were there to see you last year, it always starts with a New Way root beer and a crumbly burger.
For real.
You got to get over there.
For sure.
Got to get over there, especially for the root beer. Big time root beer fan.
Oh, yeah.
Let's finish it off with this one. We just passed Halloween. But whether it's Jaylen Mason, the trick-or-treater as a kid, or maybe even you now, your top 3 go-to Halloween candies.
I would say Skittles,
Okay.
Sour Patch Kids, and then stickers.
Oh, right.
Right.
Marshawn Lynch, Kevin.
There you go. Well, Jaylen, thanks again for joining us. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening to the Verbal Commitment podcast here on KCSN. If you like what you've seen or heard, leave us a like, subscribe, or hit us with a 5-star rating. And until next time, we'll see you on the trail and take care.